So I'm going to be talking about impact design, which is basically the design process that gets you to the social change that you want your media to have. And because I know we can often use buzzwords and not define them, I'll just start with a brief definition of what we're talking about when we talk about impact design. It's basically an intentional change creation process. So it's taking strategy, particularly advocacy strategy, and taking lessons from user-centered design and putting them together. Another thing that I'll add is just, we talk about strategy. Strategy has two elements. So if you take nothing else from this, I would say the two elements of strategy. What do you think is the first element of strategy? If we break strategy down to only two things, what is it?
Objective.
Yes, awesome. What's the only other thing that you need?
Result.
Same thing, same thing. It's choice. So if you're not making conscious choices about how you're getting to your goal, then there's an absence of strategy. So that's a little extra bit. So impact strategy or impact design is something that you're probably already doing, or almost certainly are already doing, even if you're not using that term. You're thinking about the social change you want your media to achieve, and you're making assumptions about what you think you will need to do in order to get there. So some of you in your presentation talked a little bit about the outcomes that you want to achieve or the social change you want to achieve. I'm going to get into more detail with you in the one-on-ones, but I was wondering if all the fellows could just briefly say, the change that I hope my media will make. And try not to think too much about process, but just what you would like, I will feel like my media has had the effect I want if I see this in the world. Wherever you are in thinking about that question.
Could it be like grandiose?
Yeah, sure. I feel like it's easier to work backwards from grandiose than to work upwards from incremental and tactical. Yeah, totally.
So the end of surveillance based on racial and religious profiling.
Nice.
That's ridiculous.
And I think, wait, we're living in a democracy? That should be a given. It should be a given.
That's super. It's actually a really good goal.
Yeah, that should be given. I feel sad that we have to state that and call it an ambitious goal. I think that's, yeah.
Privacy by design.
Ooh.
What is it, sorry? Privacy by design.
I think I would say something similar is what came up in the discussion is instead of saying I have nothing to hide, saying I have nothing to show.
Yeah, I would want people to be skeptical about the request to connect objects in their home to the
Okay, cool. So people are basically a lot about making choices, and then yours is more of a policy. It sounds like a policy goal, what the government might be doing. Cool. So I'm now going to present a little bit about our approach to impact design. If you looked in the pre-work, you saw a little bit about it. It's linear, and it has a very specific structure. And I find that to be useful. Social change is super complex. I think it can help to have simple models. If you look at it and you feel like it doesn't apply to you, or it's resistant to the way you're thinking about your work, then we'll come up with something else. So just want to preface that.
It looks fun.
It looks fun? Yes. Yeah, it may or may not involve dance. But yeah, it will involve the creation of media, which is all these photos are from the case study, one of the case studies I'm going to talk about, which is a virtual reality project. What?
What are they doing there? 360?
Yeah, a 360 piece. Yeah.
Hiding under it.
Yep. Yeah, so you can see the cameras are, and I'm not sure why there's a GoPro on top. That might be, not sure what that's about, but.
The Google camera doesn't have a top camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a seal
Okay.
open.
But then looks like there's about 20 different cameras on that device underneath it. So, okay, so this is how we think about theory of change. And basically, this is the key structural element of impact design. And I guess Could you raise a finger if you've heard the term theory of change before? Okay. Okay, raise 2 fingers if you've seen a theory of change before the pre-work. Awesome. And if you've made a theory of change related to your own work. Okay, awesome. So how does this relate to theory of change that you've done before? Because this is a very basic model. Because theory of change can take, I mean, you could take days and weeks and months to do theory of change.
Or like Mark's an entire life.
Right. That's true. It could be, it doesn't need to be a model or a structure or plan at all. It can be like a philosophy. Yeah. Anything else? Just what are you coming to regarding theory of change?
Usually there's a way to mark impact. Measure. Why is it? That's an end. It's like SMART goals, measurements.
Yeah.
Metrics.
Metrics. Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, usually you have sort of, here's the world as we see it, and this is what we see as broken.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So this is as I said, basic model theory of change. It has these elements of measurement and goal. Basically, using this model, we read left to right, so time is progressing upward from the present to the future, and then it's created starting the future and going back into the past, so working backwards. So we start with the goal, which we talked about, and then there's some intermediate dependencies, right? Well, we can't do that until we do that. Okay, we can't do that until we do that. We can't do that until we do that, and kind of build back in that way. And then basically, when do you stop your theory of change at something that you could do tomorrow or next week? Something you could literally put in your calendar and check off and say, okay, we've done that. And then measurement exists in 2 ways. One of them is this integrated testing, which is, it's like an iteration process. You have an assumption that links 2 stages to each other, and you say, okay, did this happen the way I expected? And if it did, you continue forward. If it didn't, which usually it won't, then you adapt some way your expectations. And you basically use that testing to alter your theory of change. So you write it out in the beginning, you say, this is how I think it's gonna work out, and then you have a way of adapting it as you go, because all the social change you're trying to do is extremely complex, and there's no way to know from the beginning how it's gonna look, but if you have some checking as you go through, you can sort it out. And then these final measures are what I think most of us think about when we think about measurement. It's, how many people saw the film, if that was your goal, did this legislation pass or not, if that was your goal. But achieving those final measures happens because there's adaptation happening throughout. So any thoughts or questions about that? Just this core element. So you'll be making these, by the way. That might also spur some questions.
So does force usually send you, so we want them to write this law. We thought that the first thing to do next week was to make banners and protest. We went to the protest and we realized that these were the wrong people to be protesting.
Right.
Does that iteration, in your model, can it change the goal, or does it change the next step that you should do?
Yes, that's a good question. So I would say both. So you will select a goal that can be achieved by the steps that you identify for yourself, and that you say, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and for that reason I can achieve this goal. You may, as you move through the theory of change, realize that your goal was too ambitious or not ambitious enough. So all elements can and should and will change. But I still think it's important, because I think sometimes in activism we engage in magical thinking, and we just say we want this to happen. Okay, how? And we're like, well, but if you actually have steps, you're forcing yourself to say, okay, then this needs to happen. And like, what can I do? Who do I need to bring in to support me? So, yeah. Anything else? No? Okay. So also,
Just
yeah.
a quick thought. So
Yeah.
that every time that I see kind of these models, I'm reminded of in NGOs. You had something called managing based on results.
Okay.
And that was like changed the world of NGOs from the 1990s to
Okay.
late 2000s, like now. Because of what you're saying, instead of I'm looking for the term, who's my ally here between French and English, to be des pelleteurs de nuages, like you have these goals, but you'll never really get to achieve them.
Something
Because
about
it's like
to-
wishful thinking. That's
Okay.
what I'm looking for.
Oh,
So
wishful
it
thinking,
kind of
yeah.
cuts down the wishful thinking into
Yeah.
different actors.
Yeah.
So would you have that? And so what I meant is the managing based on results was really short-term, intermediate-term, long-term, but also by actors. So by actors, you had different set of goals. Would you also do that differently with different publics or actors or audiences?
So this can get infinitely complex. I think
Key one.
I would know. I mean, you can make multiple theories of change for multiple goals if you want, but I think some people, they say, oh, mine is too complex. So I can't, this is going to be too simple. It's like, well, if yours is more complex, like it will be many times more complex than this. So, put it in some format where it's legible to you. But yeah, you can make multiple, you can use multiple of these. You can have many, many more intermediate steps. I think because the theory of change does change so much as you do it, it's good to keep it light in the beginning, but people have different preferences. So then, yeah.
Sorry, I just joined, so you
Yeah.
might have addressed this already.
Yeah.
But
Introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my name is Sultan Sharif. I'm a first-year grad student at CMS. I'm a filmmaker
great.
and have done a lot in community-based distribution models, working with mostly in the independent narrative film realm. But I've done something similar to this, and so I was wondering, and that's what I'm working on now here at MIT, and I was wondering, like, where does sort of I'm trying to design something now where it's following this model loosely, but people are sort of generating their own text as a sort of almost as like a visualization of the community organizing. So a group I work with in Detroit, the Allied Media Groups, like we do people can make buttons at the instance of the screening, or do like sort of community narrative pieces. So we've been trying to think about like ways to build in something where you're creating new media as a group, as a way to sort of help strengthen like a shared narrative that can also then be mobilized as you move sort of forward up the...
Yeah, so there's some examples of that, but that would basically be one of your intermediate steps. Say, we're going to mobilize the community, they're going to make media, they're going to use it in this way for this purpose, and that will get us to the next step. So yeah, that could be an example of what an intermediate step would look like. Okay. So also just for transparency, the connection between the theory of change and the impact plans that you're going to have. The impact plan is basically, it's going to look like what you need it to look like. If you want it to be visual, it's going to be visual. If you want a lot of text, it's going to be a lot of text. If you want to put to-do notes in your Google Calendar, it's going to look like that. It's whatever is actionable to you, but basically it's the theory of change plus timeline. So, I'm going to do this at this time, this at this time, this at this time. So, just so you know where we're going. So now I'm going to do a couple of examples. Hopefully the sound will work. So the first example is from Harmony Labs. It's the first iteration of our Action Lab program, which basically it rapidly prototypes social impact uses of emerging media technology. And the first one we did was with the technology of virtual reality and the issue of bullying, and we created anti-bullying VR pieces for middle school, which you can see some testing going on here. So I'm just gonna, since everyone else has been doing this, I'll show a small trailer to get you a sense of the creative kind of look and feel of it, and hopefully the sound will come out of the right place. So let's see.
I did not realize at the beginning.
So it's coming out of the wrong place, but it's still working, right? It's still fine. Okay, that's great. I'll just keep doing that then. Okay.
I did not realize at the beginning how important it was that 3 makers with such different skill sets were chosen for this project. MJ is this choreographer, filmmaker. Adora has this background in journalism and tech. I come with a film writing, directing background. The fact that all of us collaborated on each project really changed them. All three of these projects are better and more nuanced and more sophisticated because those different voices were weighing in on them.
We don't know exactly like what the best team is like to create the best virtual reality content, and so this has been a fascinating and a really important experience of seeing like how all these pieces might work together.
I think this has been one of the most effective creative processes that I've personally experienced. You know, we're getting a lot of feedback, and at times, I think there've been a few moments where it's felt pretty overwhelming, but for the most part, it's been really helpful to get clear on what is resonating and what is not, and then on top of that, how do we bring this story into the 360 space in the most entertaining and effective way and stay on topic with bullying.
Watching the evolution of this has been really great, and I think it's a good template in many, many, many ways for how many people need to be thinking about it, whether you're doing it for profit or you're doing it for nonprofit.
Okay, so I'll just give you a little feel of it. Oh yeah, I forgot this part. It is fun, yes. So those are the three creatives that we brought on to do 3 VR pieces. So I'll just go through our little theory of change to create and pilot the experiences. So unsurprisingly, we started out with research. We were really concerned that the makers, as we called them, that basically did the story and script, developed the story and script for each VR experience, understood the context of the issue, right? So this blue circle is from an actual briefing book we made for them about bullying. And so we did this research process before the creatives were even brought on. And our purpose in doing that was finding what we call this strategic sweet spot, right? For immediate impact. So the sweet spot has 3 pieces you can see. You have the opportunities presented by the social problem, places where you can put leverage on, make a difference, the affordances of the media technology, and the method of deployment. So what audiences, what methods, what screening, what additional media making, as Sultan mentioned, are you going to need to actually have this intersection of media and social problem result in some change? And then for our project, it ended up looking like this. So we had, through our research, we found that there was a dramatic drop-off in existing anti-bullying programs in middle school. So we said, okay, we're going to focus on that demographic. We actually started with our media, which was VR, because of a partnership we had with Google. So that was fixed from the beginning, which is sometimes doesn't happen like that. In our case, it did. And then method of deployment, from that research, we also learned that something that did seem effective about existing methods was that they were actually bringing the VR into the classroom. So, we could have put it on YouTube, we could have had screenings, we could have taken it to film festivals. So we said, actually, if we want students to see this, we want to bring it into classrooms, which meant we have to do lesson plans, which applied all kinds of elements that later became the theory of change. And then the sweet spot basically became the goal that we used to create the theory of change. So this is one way to state it. Free and effective VR experiences and curricula to motivate upstanding, which is moving from being a bystander to making some positive effect on the problem, to be available globally by March 2018. And this is an example of a goal changing, because we actually didn't know from the beginning that we could have global reach. That came into the project later when we started working with Google's trust and safety team. So this is an example of how a goal might change. In this case, it was able to become more ambitious. Sometimes that's not possible, but. So basically from here, we were able to create a theory of change, and we actually brought on creative people based on already knowing how we wanted our media to make change. So there's a lot of detail I could give about our theory of change. I'm going to focus on the testing. So we started with expert testing, which basically meant that we were looking at and talking to researchers who were telling us, for example, that there's a drop-off in the efficacy of bullying in middle school. So knowing at a macro scale and with academic rigor, what does this problem look like? Then we did subject testing, the subjects being students that are actually bullied. And so we brought them in to speak directly to the creatives in a workshop, and this is them. And it was actually very emotional. Bullying nowadays is awful. I don't know if any of you know kids that are that age, but it's brutal. And then after that, we did user testing. So this was not those directly affected by bullying, but those who we wanted to see the media and to be influenced. So those were students that we don't know if they're experiencing bullying, if they're bullies, if they're being bullied. We're just assuming that they can become upstanders. So the way that we did user testing was basically, and you can see in the second image, the makers actually worked with youth to co-write the scripts. And a lot of it was around language. We were particularly careful around language because, you get slang wrong and you just lose the credibility of that audience, but it also went to story and things like that. Then we did play testing, which was actually, once there were rough cuts of the experience, actually bringing the curriculum and the experience into classrooms, which you saw in that first image. And then pilot testing allowed us to see the final change, a first kind of glimpse into the change we're hoping to make, which is actually bringing the experience and the curriculum into classrooms, which is happening now. And that is, does the media actually change the bullying perspective and behavior? So when we say effective, that's what we mean. Is the media actually making students less likely to bully or more believing that they will, be upstanders? And that's happening with an actual academic researcher who's carrying that out. So that's what our testing looked like. Are there any other questions about that or any other element that I didn't talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was curious about the goal.
Yeah.
So when you listed it in a couple of previous slides, it was
effective. Yeah.
But it described the medium. So it's like we want to make this globally available curricula. It wasn't X amount of middle school students become upstanders, or we see a decrease in self-reported bullying. It was so.
I think so. So far as our project has gone to this point, we are piloting. So piloting just means testing with, I think it's 100 students. Gotcha. So we could have put that in ultimately, we would like to see a larger effect, but the effect that we're taking responsibility for in this initial phase of the project is just basically going up, testing for effectiveness, right. and the pilot, and then we hope to move beyond that, but we're at this first stage now. So, but yeah, the more specific you can be, the more numeric you can be, is helpful.
It was just made me think about, should we describe the goals that they could be achieved by any set of tactics, including media? Do you know what I mean? Do you want a set of goals that you could achieve by showing up to the protest, or becoming a politician, or making a really interesting interaction?
I would say it's a goal that you personally take responsibility for. Yeah. So.
Become a politician is good at
No, but there's all kinds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like there's different ways to achieve that impact, and we're assuming that as media makers, we could be one road to social change.
I think that's a nice way of saying it, the goal that you can actually take personal responsibility for. Because you could want to take responsibility for that big change, but you could also realize got a lot of things.
Be careful what you wish for.
Time to be realistic.
Everyone does this differently, but every time I've done these kind of things for the human rights organizations I've worked for, there's several levels of impact, right? So there's the impact that you can directly measure, and then there's the bigger macro impact. And everyone has different ways of mapping this kind of areas of change, but that's one way I think of looking at just different levels of impact.
And I would say if measurable tends us to think in a more quantitative way, I feel like there should always be the parameter, will you know it when you see it? Yeah. And if you don't know it when you see it, it's just going to be a mechanism of bullshitting. Of oh, we changed this. Okay, what was it going to look like at the beginning? Is that what it looks like? Or can you make an argument that you still achieved it even though it looks different? But yeah, what's it going to look like? Yeah. Okay. This is a second example. This is related to surveillance, which is nice. Has anyone heard of the Argus project? Yeah. Okay. I was thinking that, if you hadn't, you probably should. Should I show the trailer?
Yeah.
Okay. Trailer.
We could see your email.
Ah, hopefully there's nothing embarrassing there. So much for privacy, right? Okay, here we go. This is a little longer.
All our loved ones' lives are important to us. It might not be important to the officer that took them, but they were important to us, the family. When NYPD killed my son, they killed my whole family. They killed my whole life. We care about cops. We know their work is hard and strenuous and what they go up against on a daily basis. But we also see that them videos don't lie.
Well, the myth to me is that the police are there to protect us. I was arresting individuals who were the victims, not the criminals. They were victims of the system.
Where is the justice? There is no justice.
So just because it's a little elliptical, what does the suit do?
It watches back.
Okay, good. Not that elliptical. So I was coming out of the Black Lives Matter and police violence, and the individual looks like they're wearing the body armor of the police, but they're actually using the body armor. So yeah.
I think that's the flaw in the design of this, because it looks too much like the police.
Okay.
I thought that was
A flaw in the design.
A flaw in the design is that it looks too military, and it has like an activist watching back. Like, can't be like a police body cam. It has to be the opposite of that. So what does that
Okay.
mean? Anyway,
Okay.
I talked to them about this.
Okay. You talked to them about this?
Was it deployed?
It's a prototype.
Yeah. So my understanding also is that they first made the suit and now they're making a transmedia project around it. I don't know if anyone has more updated information, but yeah. So this is a theory of change based on some of their plans about how they want to use the movie, but it's a hypothetical one that I made, so I'll just disclaim in that way. So this is kind of more like what Sultan was talking about. So the previous theory of change was a theory of change basically of media creation that ended with an initial test, which is the pilot. And this is going from a media that's already been created through to some advocacy outcome. It's an impact campaign. So the goal is a legislative one of changing or passing a certain kind of law that would limit the power of police, I think bring civilian oversight, and these elements will probably look familiar to people who have done impact campaigns, but you're starting by identifying swing votes in the legislature, who are your community partners, because obviously you can't do this alone. This is a tremendous effort. You have then community screenings, but they're in the swing districts of the legislators. So who is on the fence about voting for this law? And then that's the way you actually do the screening, right? And then when you're at the screening in those districts, you mobilize the viewers to call, to email, to write postcards, to have meetings, to sign up to have meetings with their legislators. And then I said, our guests should probably go to the legislator meetings too. Then you might have some, you have some good visuals, maybe get some media attention. And then you want to be tracking legislative support. Do we have your support? Yes, no. And then from there you can say, okay, first we had 10, now we have 3. We're really going to focus on 3. And again, this is not something that a filmmaker would necessarily do, but this is something you would want your community partner to be able to do. And then, goal achievement, it's very binary, which can be intimidating, but, it also prevents us from bullshitting. It's like, well, did the law pass? Yes or no? And then you can kind of have secondary measures, like how many votes did passed. That becomes more useful if the law fails. You can say, okay, well, how close did we get? If we're really close, we're like, okay, that worked, even though it didn't work. But if, no one voted, we'll say, okay, well, that actually was ineffective. Let's not do that again. And then why was it ineffective? So any thoughts or questions on the second case study? Theory of change.